I think the Cowboys, it's fair to say, certainly had decent to high expectations heading into 2020 because you're talking about another year of development for Dak Prescott. You're talking about bringing in a former Super Bowl winning coach and Mike McCarthy. The Jason Garrett era is done, thank God. It's going to be addition by subtraction, and then all that shit didn't happen. Dak going down early in the year with the injury. The defense being unbelievably god-awfully bad. Mike McCarthy, the coach, looking outclassed and overmatched consistently. And then you look at all of the injury trouble that the Cowboys had. Like, it was one of those things where it just felt like a can't-get-right season. No matter what was going to happen, it was just destined and doomed for failure. And the best thing that could have happened for the Cowboys is the 2020 season to be done and freaking over. What a waste of time that had to feel like for everybody involved. And now it's time to move on to 2021. This team made some changes in the offseason. I won't call them improvements. We'll see if they are improvements or not. But Chidobe Awuzie left in free agency, as did Cameron Irving, Xavier Woods, and Alden Smith. Signed guys like Terrell Basham and Keanu Neal, Malik Hooker, DeMonte Casey. So you could clearly see, at least with those last couple of signings, they were trying to remake and redo the secondary the best way they could. Because that secondary was getting eaten up quite a bit last year. But when you look at the Cowboys and the way they were constructed, as much as anything, you could say the best thing that could happen in terms of off-season acquisitions or off-season additions was getting guys like Tyron Smith healthy and Zach Martin healthy and Dak Prescott healthy. Like, that's the biggest move that they could make, is just stay off the damn injury list. So now we come into 2021, and I'm wondering here, unless Mike McCarthy is truly that washed and truly that bad as a head coach, if we're not looking at the odds-on favorite, not from just because of a media hype or bias standpoint, but just in terms of reality, X's and O's, how the teams look on paper, if we're not looking at the clear-cut favorites in the NFC least. When you look at the NFL draft, there was clearly an intent to fix the defense. They took Micah Parsons in the first round, Kelvin Joseph in round 2, Odigizua in round 3. 3 guys that you envision having some type of role in year 1 on that defense, especially Micah Parsons. You want to put him in that linebacking core with Jalen Smith, later Van Der Esch. You want him to come in and play like the marquee type of pick and the marquee type of talent that many people envision him to be. But like I said, for this Cowboys team, the good thing is if they're healthy, they should be markedly better than they were in 2020. When you look at them, like, you start off with the strengths, it comes down to Dak Prescott. You know, you either have a quarterback or you don't. You clearly have a quarterback in Dallas when you talk about Dak Prescott. And you could even see early on in the season, as terrible as that defense was, and as much as the Cowboys were finding ways to just bend over and take it and lose games, like, Dak was putting up fantastic numbers, and he was doing everything he could offensively and helping to carry this team. So it really sucked to see a guy that, you know, in a contract year was positioned potentially to have easily the best season of his career, have it end in the fashion, in the way that it did. And I do hope that Dak is healthy and he's good, that any reports of any other problems that he has are overreactions or much ado about nothing, and that we're going to see Dak Prescott. Because the reality is that the Dallas Cowboys, you associate them with the quarterbacks. You know, going back to the days of Dandy Don Meredith and Roger Staubach, and even, yes, to a lesser degree, Danny White. For those that are going to be mad, you know, you had a couple of years of Craig Morton there. Yes, you did. But Troy Aikman to Tony Romo, like, you've had some really good quarterback play over the years. And there's something to having a star, in this case like a Dak Prescott, be the star of the stars of the Cowboys of the NFL. So I hope he's there. And it especially makes it sweeter when you beat the Cowboys when they're at full strength. Because they are fun to hate. Because they are the Chicago Bears of Texas. Sitting there talking about all the shit that happened 25 plus damn years ago, like that's relevant to the here and now. How pathetic and sad. And I always bring it up because it's a fun tidbit. To think that the Chicago Bears have more recently made it to both an NFC Championship game with Jake sorry-ass Cutler as their starting quarterback and Rex Sexy Rexy bitch-ass Grossman as their quarterback. They went to a Super Bowl. What the fuck have the Cowboys done the past 2+ decades? That's an embarrassment, a joke, and a shame, and solely, squarely pointing the finger of blame at one man, that is Jerry Jones. But when you have a guy like Dak Prescott, it can be different. It can be. Doesn't mean it's going to be. especially when you bring a Dak Prescott in and you've got this trio of wide receivers like you've got with CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup. Like, that is a trio of wide receivers that has to create some pause for opposing defenses, opposing defensive coordinators. Like, who do you choose to stop? Who do you pick on? Who do you double? Like, who do you do bracket coverage? Like, all these things, all these other defensive concepts, you have to figure out a way to stop them. Because if not, Dak's going to be able to light you up in the passing game. When I look at this roster, like, that's the thing that stands out. Is you've got a easily top 10, probably top 8, maybe even top 5 or 6 quarterback in the league when healthy in Dak Prescott, and a top flight elite, when you look at the talent and depth of it, elite receiving core unit there in Dallas. Certainly several questions here. The offensive line. Like, there's this bit of association that at one point in time the Cowboys had by far the best offensive line in the league. And that has not been the reality the past couple of seasons. It certainly was not the reality of 2020, as you had several guys hurt and you had to do this hodgepodge. Like, it was a rough stint. If you got Tyron Smith back healthy, if you've got Zach Martin back healthy, you've got La'el Collins for a full season. Like, if you've got some of these guys, you know, this still could be a really, really good offensive line unit. And with as much as they've invested in that unit over the years, even when you lose a Travis Frederick to a retirement, you've got to sit there and make sure that you get the most out of them, because everything that you do is structured around that. And then you look at the running game and you say that's going to have an impact on Ezekiel Elliott. This is a guy they gave a lot of money to. They need Zeke to eat. They need him to be a marquee level back, which he absolutely was not in 2021. When you talk about the running game, you also got to talk about the defense. They were bad against the run last year, and I'm not sure how much better they would have gotten against the run this year. We'll see if change in defensive approaches and philosophy is going to make a difference there. They better hope it does, because otherwise teams are just going to feast on him in the running game. And then you got Mike McCarthy, too. You know, he did not look good last year. He looked like the guy the last few years in Green Bay that Packers fans love to criticize, and legitimately so, for his lack of ability to adjust, his lack of ability to grasp certain concepts. Like, it was not good. He's got a chance to redeem himself here in 2020, but the early returns are not promising for a guy that was bringing a certain level of expectations along with him when he was hired for the job. But the biggest question mark to me is health. This is a team last year that had so many damn injuries. They've got to be able to stay healthy. If they stay healthy, they are clearly the most talented team in this division. And that's just a fact, whether we want to say it or not, whether we want to give credit or not. They have the best quarterback. They have the best wide receiving trio. They have the most talented running back. And you're going to say, well, what about Saquon Barkley? Okay, you know what? At worst, second most talented running back in the division. You know, they could have the best offensive line if everybody's healthy. They could have the best linebacking core if everybody's healthy. Like, I go on and on and on. This team is the most talented. This is the type of team that, on the one hand, you feel like could be a Super Bowl contender, but you wonder sometimes how much that feeds into the fact that you just see them all the time, and they're always talked about, and they get so exposed, there's so much exposure from the media that it naturally artificially inflates the profile of how good the talent is and how good the team is compared to others. It's a valid question. But I think objectively, if you look at it, this is clearly, easily the most talented team in this division by a good distance. And if they stay healthy, and Dak is Dak, they should win this division relatively handily. How that translates in terms of outside of the divisional picture, and whether they're truly a contender or just a division winner that gets a home playoff game, maybe can make it to the divisional round of the playoffs before they get bounced, I'm not sure yet. Early on in the season, the first 2 weeks, they're going to get marquee challenges. They got to go to Tampa, that Thursday night game against the defending Super Bowl champs, which is always a tough task. You know, there's a history there in that opening Thursday night game of the Super Bowl champs coming out and playing well. You know, certainly it's going to be a challenge for them there. And then week 2, they got to go to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers and Justin Herbert. You're talking about a situation where this Dallas team could get off to a little bit of a slow start. Like, the noise could get loud. The heat could get hot, could get real hot. And we're going to see this team and organization be tested on how they can deal with the pressure, how they can deal with the questions, how they can deal with the criticism, because you know, they're potentially set up to get some early criticism. But as you look later on in the year, and especially the last 5 weeks of the year, like, this team is potentially positioned that if they're close, they have a chance to handle their business and run away with the division. They got to go to Washington and to the Giants. Then they host Washington. So that's your week 14 through 16. Got to play the Cardinals at home in week 17 and then travel to Philadelphia in week 18. All 5 of those games are potentially gettable. All 5 of those games are potentially winnable. And I think that's what you could see with this Cowboys team is that they might struggle a little bit at the beginning, but it's really hard to read it because of so many other pieces and players that weren't around for much last year coming back into the fold this year. I look at this team, though, and I think, like I said, they're clearly the most talented team in the division. They absolutely have the best quarterback in the division, and by a good distance. If Dak is healthy all year, and this team doesn't win the NFC least by at least 2 or 3 games, there is something really wrong with this picture. As a result, I think they're going to be a 10 or 11 win team, but I'll go 10-7, first in the NFC least, and then we'll see what happens to them come playoff time. But having Dak Prescott healthy and the weapons on offense healthy should be enough to win the division. How well that offensive line holds up, how well their running game does under Zeke Elliott and Pollard, and how well their defense can hold up will determine maybe just how far they can go this year.